Man abandons wife. 18 years later, he sees her at the airport with a young woman who looks just like him. He tries to approach them. John stepped off the plane, feeling the weight of the years in each step he took through the airport. His mind was adrift in thoughts, reflecting on the luxurious life he had carved out in New York, which now seemed empty and purposeless. As he reached the arrival area, an unexpected sight made his heart race. There was Sarah, the woman he had abandoned 18 years ago, accompanied by a young woman who was the spitting image of himself. For a moment, John was paralyzed. His eyes followed the pair as they moved through the crowd. Sarah hadn't changed much, except for an expression of weariness and determination he didn't remember. The young woman by her side, with such familiar features, could only be his daughter. Regret and guilt consumed him as he tried to process the situation. Before he could take any action, Sarah and the young woman disappeared into the crowd, leaving John with an even greater sense of loss. John knew he needed to find them. The decision to leave Sarah behind, chasing wealth and success, had been the worst of his life. Now he had a second chance, but he knew it would be difficult to win back what he had lost. The airport was bustling, and John felt disoriented. Memories of his youth with Sarah came flooding back. They had dreams of building a life together, but ambition took over. Now, seeing Sarah and the young woman he could only assume was his daughter, he realized how deeply his choices had affected them. The sound of the loudspeakers announcing arrivals and departures seemed distant, as John forced himself to move forward. He headed to the baggage claim area, hoping to find some clue that would lead him to Sarah. Each step was a reminder of his resolve to correct the past. He approached a security guard, quickly describing Sarah and the young woman, hoping someone might have seen them. "Sorry, sir. The airport is very busy today. It's hard to track someone without more information," the guard replied sympathetically. John thanked him and continued his search, his eyes scanning the crowd incessantly. Every unfamiliar face was a reminder that he knew nothing about Sarah's life. What had she gone through while he was chasing his own selfish dreams? John sat in an airport cafe, his thoughts drifting back to the past. He remembered the day he told Sarah about his decision to move to New York. She had begged him to stay, but the lure of making a fortune was stronger. The farewell was painful, with broken promises and hearts shattered. John was blinded by the prospect of success and left Sarah behind, unaware that she carried a secret that would forever change their lives. The years that followed were filled with financial achievements, glamorous parties, and superficial relationships. John had achieved the success he longed for, but loneliness and emotional emptiness accompanied him. Sarah, on the other hand, faced the challenges of raising a daughter alone, a struggle he never knew she endured. He never imagined that his departure would leave such deep scars. Now, sitting in that cafe, John felt the weight of his choices. He knew he needed to find Sarah and Emily, the young woman he had only glimpsed. Every thought was a mix of fear and hope. What if they didn't want to see him? What if it was too late to ask for forgiveness? Regret ate at his soul, but he was determined to make amends. Resolved to find Sarah and his daughter, John decided to revisit significant places from his past with Sarah, hoping to uncover any clues about her current life. Each place he visited, from the park where they spent afternoons together to the old house where they lived, brought back painful memories and a sense of loss. As he walked through places he once frequented with Sarah, John reflected on the devastating impact of his departure. Sarah had bravely fought to raise their daughter alone, facing unimaginable hardships. John realized that, while he indulged in the glamour of his new life, Sarah was waging a silent, heroic battle. Finally, he understood that it would take more than luck to find Sarah and Emily. With a heavy heart, John prepared to face the consequences of his past actions, knowing he would need to find a way to regain the love and trust of Sarah and Emily. Determined to rectify his mistakes and find Sarah and Emily, John decided he needed professional help. He hired a private detective, someone experienced in locating missing people. The frantic search began, and John was willing to do whatever it took to find his family. The detective started by tracing public records, searching for any clue where Sarah and Emily might be. Meanwhile, John revisited significant places from his past with Sarah. He walked through the park where they used to spend afternoons together, sat on the benches where they discussed the future, and even visited the old house where they had lived. Each place brought back painful memories and a sense of loss. Each clue revealed fragments of the life he had lost, exposing the scars his departure had left. The detective managed to locate old friends of Sarah, people who still remembered her and might know where she was now. Eagerly, John accompanied the detective on each visit, each meeting, hoping to find the information he desperately needed. During one of these visits, they met an old friend of Sarah, who gave them a crucial tip. Sarah moved to a nearby neighborhood a few years ago, the friend said. She was trying to start a new life, and her daughter, Emily, is a very promising young woman. But she has been facing some health issues. The mention of Emily's health problems made John's heart tighten. He knew he had to find them as soon as possible. The detective continued to follow the leads, now with more determination. Each day that passed, John felt he was getting closer to reuniting with his family, but also more aware of the challenge it would be to regain their trust. Meanwhile, John faced his own inner demons. Guilt and regret were always present, constantly reminding him of the choices he had made and the price he had paid. He knew that when he finally found Sarah and Emily, he would have to face not only their anger and resentment, but also his own feelings of inadequacy and guilt. Finally, after weeks of relentless searching, the detective found a concrete lead: Sarah's current address. With his heart racing, John prepared for the reunion, knowing he would have to face the consequences of his past actions and find a way to regain the love and trust of Sarah and Emily. John stopped in front of the modest house indicated by the detective, his heart pounding uncontrollably. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself before taking the first step toward the door. Each step felt like a ton as he approached the moment he had longed for yet deeply feared. When he finally reached the door, he hesitated for a moment before knocking. The sound echoed inside the house, and he could hear footsteps approaching. The door slowly opened, revealing Sarah. For an instant, both stood motionless, staring at each other in silence. Sarah looked surprised and cautious, but there was also an expression of pain in her eyes. "John," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "Sarah," he replied, his voice laden with emotion. I needed to find you. I needed to see you." Sarah interrupted him, the pain turning into anger. "You left us, John. You left me alone. You have no idea what I went through." John felt the words like blows. "I know I made a terrible mistake, Sarah, but I'm here now. I want to make things right." Before John could continue, a young woman appeared in the hallway. It was Emily, and her resemblance to John was undeniable. She looked at the scene with curiosity and confusion. "Who is he, Mom?" Emily asked, her voice full of mistrust. John looked at Sarah, trying to understand what was happening. "Sarah, is this my daughter?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "Yes, John. This is Emily. She's your daughter." The impact of the revelation hit John hard. "My daughter?" he murmured incredulously. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Sarah shook her head, holding back tears. "You left us, John. I was alone, scared, and didn't know how you'd react. And then, you never came back." John felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." Emily remained silent for a moment, absorbing the information. Then, her face filled with resentment. My father? The man who abandoned us? John felt a sharp pain in his chest. Emily, I know it's hard to understand. I made many mistakes, but I'm here now to fix things. Emily crossed her arms, her gaze hard. And you think you can just come back and everything will be okay? You don't know anything about me, about us. John took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. I know I can't change the past, Emily, but I want to be part of your future. I want to be a dad to you. Sarah, with eyes still brimming with tears, intervened. John, you can't just show up and expect everything to be okay. It's been years of pain, of struggle. I had to be strong for myself and for Emily. You weren't there. John nodded, accepting the harsh truth. I know, Sarah, and I'm deeply sorry. But I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove I've changed. The tension was palpable. Emily, still firm, looked at her mother. I don't have a father. I never did, and I won't now. With that, she turned and stormed back into the house, slamming the door behind her. Sarah, visibly weary, looked at John with tearful eyes, and, with a deep sigh, said, Come in, John. We need to talk. John entered the house, feeling the weight of the moment. The living room was simple but welcoming, filled with signs of a life lived with hardship, but also with love. He sat down on the couch while Sarah settled into an armchair opposite him. Emily, she's going through a lot, John, Sarah began, trying to find the right words. What do you mean? Asked John, the concern evident in his voice. Sarah hesitated, but then decided to speak openly. She's having a lot of trouble at school. She feels abandoned and it's affecting her behavior and her grades. She misses you, even if she doesn't want to admit it. John felt a stab of guilt. I didn't know, Sarah. If I had known, I would have come back sooner. Sarah shook her head. That's just a part of it, John. Emily is also sick. She has a serious condition and needs ongoing treatment. John's heart tightened. What does she have? How can I help? Sarah sighed deeply. She has an autoimmune disease. It requires expensive medication and constant treatment. I'm doing the best I can, but it's not easy. John felt the need to act immediately. Let me help, Sarah. I can pay for her treatment. I want to be part of your lives and help in any way I can. Sarah looked at him, the pain and fatigue reflected in her eyes. It's not that simple, John. Emily won't accept your help so easily. She's very angry at you. And, to be honest, so am I. John nodded, understanding the depth of the feelings involved. I know I need to earn your trust. But please, let me help with Emily's treatment. It's the least I can do. At that moment, Emily appeared at the doorway, her eyes full of tears and anger. We don't need you, she said, her voice firm. We've managed on our own so far. You can't just show up now and fix everything with money. John stood up, taking a step toward Emily, but she backed away. Emily, I know you have every right to be angry with me. I just want to help. Emily crossed her arms, maintaining her distance. You can't fix everything with money, John. You weren't here when we needed you. Now it's too late. John felt the pain in Emily's words but remained firm. I can't change the past, but I can be here now. Please, let me help. Sarah stood up, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. Let's take this one step at a time, John. Maybe we can find a way for you to help, but it will be on our terms and in our time. John nodded, feeling there was still a long road ahead. All right, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want what's best for Emily and for you. Sarah looked at him, a mix of hope and skepticism in her eyes. We'll see how things go, but know that it will be a slow process. John agreed, determined to prove he was there to stay, willing to face all challenges to regain the trust and love of his family. In the days that followed, John continued to visit Sarah and Emily, trying to slowly integrate into their lives. He realized that, Despite the resistance, there was a small opening for him to become part of their lives. But one thing he didn't fully understand was the strength that Sarah and Emily seemed to draw from something he couldn't identify. One Sunday morning, Sarah invited John to accompany them to church. He hesitated for a moment but accepted, curious to better understand what had given Sarah the strength to carry on. Upon arrival, they were warmly greeted by the community. The church was simple but vibrant with positive energy. People greeted Sarah and Emily with affection, demonstrating a sense of community and support. The sermon was led by Pastor Michael, a middle-aged man with a serene and welcoming demeanor. During the sermon, John saw how Sarah was engaged, finding comfort in the words of faith and hope that Pastor Michael shared. He watched Emily too, still hurt, but participating in some way, seeking some form of relief. After the service, Pastor Michael approached Sarah and greeted her warmly. "Sarah, it's always a pleasure to see you here, and this must be John," he said, extending his hand to John. "Yes, Pastor Michael, this is John," Sarah replied. "John, this is Pastor Michael, our friend and spiritual counselor." John shook the pastor's hand, feeling a wave of respect for the man who clearly meant so much to Sarah and Emily. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Pastor Michael," said John, trying to mask his anxiety. "John, I heard you've returned to Sarah and Emily's lives. It's a challenging journey, but I'm here to help in any way I can," the pastor said with a gentle smile. John nodded, feeling a bit relieved. "Thank you, Pastor. I know I have a long way to go to regain their trust." Pastor Michael led John to a bench in the church garden, where they could talk more quietly. "John, faith has been an important refuge for Sarah and Emily. When you left them, they found a place here where they could lean on. Sarah, in particular, found strength in the community and in faith to face the challenges." John listened intently as the pastor continued. "Faith isn't just about believing in something bigger, but also about finding a community that supports you. Sarah found friends here, people who stood by her during tough times. And for Emily, despite her resistance, this community has been a pillar of support." John reflected on these words, but felt compelled to be honest. "Pastor, I'm not sure I can believe in all this. I've always believed in what I can see and touch. Money, properties, success. That's what I understand. I don't know if I can believe in something bigger," Pastor Michael smiled gently. "I understand, John. Faith is a personal journey, and not everyone is ready to follow it in the same way. The important thing is that you're here, trying to understand. That's already an important step." John felt a mix of relief and internal conflict. "I want to help Sarah and Emily, but I'm not sure I can do it through faith." The pastor nodded. "Help can come in many forms, John. The community is here to support, and your presence already means a lot. Keep trying, even if it's in your own way." Emily sat in the last row of the classroom, her eyes fixed on the window. She paid no attention to the math lesson, lost in thought. John's arrival had further destabilized her already complicated life. The anger and hurt she felt towards him made it difficult to focus on anything. She had always been a diligent student, but the past few months had been particularly challenging. At school, Emily faced constant challenges. Her classmates saw her as the troubled girl, the one with an absent father and a constantly worried mother. She felt isolated and misunderstood. Every malicious comment or pitying glance only increased her frustration. Additionally, her fragile health was a constant concern. Medical treatments and frequent hospital visits caused her to miss many classes, complicating her academic situation even further. At home, things weren't much better. Sarah tried to maintain a stable environment, but John's presence created palpable tension. Emily avoided any interaction with him, keeping her distance and remaining cold. The pain of abandonment was still very present, and she could not forgive him for leaving her mother alone with all the responsibilities. John, for his part, did his utmost to reach out to Emily. He tried to engage her in conversation, showing interest in her activities, but was always met with silence or short, sharp responses. Each failed attempt at connection only increased his determination, but also his desperation. He knew it would take a long time and much patience to earn his daughter's trust. On one particularly difficult night, Emily locked herself in her room, tears streaming down her face. She felt powerless in her situation. The illness, school problems, and her father's sudden arrival. It all seemed too much to bear. Sarah knocked gently on the door, trying to offer comfort. But Emily didn't want to hear anyone. "Emily, dear, I know it's hard, but you need to give your father a chance. He's trying," said Sarah, her voice soft and caring. "He left us, Mom. He doesn't care. And now he thinks he can just come back and fix everything? I don't want that," Emily responded through tears. Meanwhile, in the hallway, John heard the conversation, feeling even more powerless. He wished he could fix things, but knew that words wouldn't be enough. He needed to show through consistent actions that he was committed to being a present father. Emily continued to wrestle with her own feelings. The anger and hurt were strong, but there was also a part of her that longed for a father. She remembered the stories her mother told about him, about how he was before he left. But the happy memories were always overshadowed by the pain of abandonment. Every day was a battle for Emily. At school, she tried to keep up appearances, but inside, she felt fragmented. At home, John's presence was a constant reminder of all that she had lost. The journey toward reconciliation would be long, and Emily wasn't sure she was ready to forgive. John felt the weight of responsibilities increase every day. As he tried to reconnect with Sarah and Emily, old business rivals began to threaten his newfound stability. Constant messages and calls from his company in New York only intensified his feeling of being pulled in several directions at once. One morning, while trying to focus on some important documents in Sarah's small home office, his phone rang again. It was his assistant in New York, reporting critical issues that needed his immediate attention. John knew his presence was essential at the company, but he also knew his absence would be devastating for his attempts to win back his family. "Sir, we need you here to resolve this. The investors are getting impatient, and we have a crucial meeting next week," his assistant said, urgency evident in his voice. John sighed, feeling the tension rise. "I understand, but I can't leave my family now. I'll try to handle as much as I can from here," he replied, trying to stay calm. The pressures of business began to interfere with his ability to connect with Emily and Sarah. He was physically present, but his mind often wandered to the problems at the company. Emily, perceptive as ever, noticed his distraction and drifted even further away. To her, it seemed that he was more concerned with his business than with her. One evening, while Sarah was preparing dinner, John tried once more to talk to Emily. "Emily, I know things are tough right now, but I'm here for you. I want to be a present father," he said, his voice full of sincerity. Emily, without looking at him, replied coldly, "You say that, but you're always on the phone, solving your business problems. It seems like nothing has changed. You still care more about your work than about us." John felt the impact of Emily's words. He knew she was right, but he didn't know how to balance the two parts of his life. He was miles away from his company in New York, but also miles away emotionally from his daughter, despite being physically present. The crisis reached its peak when an emergency at the company required his immediate attention. He spent hours on the phone, trying to resolve the situation, while Emily and Sarah isolated themselves, realizing that his efforts to reconnect were failing. One morning, Pastor Michael came to visit them. He found John exhausted, with deep circles under his eyes and a worried expression. "John, I see you're facing many challenges. It's not easy to balance all this, said the pastor, placing a comforting hand on John's shoulder. I don't know what to do, Pastor. I'm losing control of my business and my family. It seems like I'm failing in every aspect, John confessed, his voice full of frustration. Remember, John, you don't have to carry everything alone. There are people here willing to help. The community can be a support, and perhaps it's time to delegate more responsibilities at the company, advised the pastor. John knew the pastor was right. He needed to find a way to balance his responsibilities and show Emily and Sarah that they were his priority. But how to do that? That was the big question consuming him as he tried to find a way through the crisis that threatened to crumble everything around him. The situation between John and his family was worsening. Emily, who suffered from lupus, a debilitating autoimmune disease, continued to face serious health challenges. The frequent hospital visits and constant treatments were a heavy burden for everyone, especially for Sarah, who was exhausted and stressed. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Sarah could no longer hold back her frustration. John was sitting on the couch, his head buried in his hands, when Sarah walked into the room. Her eyes were red from fatigue, and the tension on her face was evident. "John, I can't take it anymore," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have no idea what I went through all these years alone. I had to raise Emily by myself, with no support. I had to work tirelessly to support the two of us, facing prejudice for being a single mother." John lifted his head, looking at Sarah with eyes full of guilt. "Sarah, I know I was wrong, but I'm here now, trying to make things right." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand, John. It's not just about being here now. I never got to marry, never got to have another relationship. Emily always needed all my attention, with her health always fragile. I had no room for anyone else in my life." John felt a knot tighten in his throat. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much you were suffering." "How could you know?" Sarah replied bitterly. "You were living your life in New York, making money and building your career, while I was here, struggling to survive. Every day was a battle, and I was alone." John sank deeper into the couch, feeling the weight of guilt crushing him. "I know nothing I say can change the past, but I'm willing to do anything to fix this, to help you and Emily." Sarah wiped her tears, but her expression remained stern. "John, words are not enough. I need to see actions. Emily needs to see that you really care. Because so far, all she sees is a man who abandoned her and now wants to come back and solve everything with money." John nodded slowly, understanding the depth of Sarah's despair. "I will prove to you that I've changed. I'll do whatever it takes." But at that moment, he knew that the road to redemption would be long and arduous. Sarah's words echoed in his mind, each a painful reminder of the years of suffering she and Emily had endured without him. The guilt and sadness deepened, but also fueled his determination to make things right. It was a quiet evening when chaos erupted. Emily, who seemed to be improving, suddenly began to experience intense pain and had difficulty breathing. Sarah rushed to Emily's room, finding her bent over in pain and sweating coldly. Desperate, she shouted for John, who immediately ran to help. "Emily, please, take deep breaths. It's going to be okay." Sarah tried to calm her daughter, but her own panic was evident in her voice. John lifted Emily in his arms, carrying her quickly to the car. On the way to the hospital, he drove as fast as he could, his mind a whirlwind of fear and guilt. Sarah held Emily's hand, trying to comfort her, while John kept his eyes fixed on the road. At the hospital, the medical team acted quickly, taking Emily to the emergency room. John and Sarah were left in the waiting room, full of anxiety. Each minute seemed like an eternity, Sarah cried quietly, while John felt powerless, remembering Sarah's words about how she had faced everything alone. Suddenly, Pastor Michael entered the waiting room, called by a desperate message from Sarah. He approached John, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "John, it's in moments like this that we need faith. Let's pray together for Emily," said the pastor with a calm serenity. John looked at Pastor Michael, feeling a mix of despair and disbelief. "Pastor, I don't know if I can. I've never been a man of faith. I don't know if I can believe." Pastor Michael nodded, understanding. "I know it's hard, John, but faith can be a source of strength in times of crisis. Let's try together." They knelt in the small hospital chapel, Pastor Michael leading the prayers, while John, for the first time in years, tried to connect with something greater than himself. "God, I know I haven't been a man of faith, but I'm here, asking for my daughter's life. Please, help Emily," he murmured, his voice breaking with emotion. As they prayed, John felt a wave of repressed emotions emerge. He remembered a secret he had kept for years, something he had never told anyone. "Pastor, there's something I need to confess," he said, his voice full of pain. Pastor Michael looked at him, encouraging him to continue. "Speak, John. I'm here to listen. When I left Sarah, it wasn't just out of ambition. I was running from something. I had discovered that I had a son with another woman before meeting Sarah. I was afraid that this woman would find me and learn about my new life. I had already abandoned the mother of my son, and the fear of being discovered made me flee again. Years later, I learned that my son got involved with a gang and died. I carry a huge guilt for that, and this guilt has haunted me all these years." Pastor Michael took a deep breath, absorbing the revelation. "John, we all have secrets and regrets. What matters is what we do from here. Use this revelation as a step toward redemption. You are here now, trying to make things right. That's a start." John nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. He knew his journey of redemption was just beginning, but now he felt a new determination to face his demons and do whatever was necessary to save Emily and win back his family. When the doctor finally entered the waiting room with a serious look on his face, John and Sarah quickly stood up. "Emily is stable, but we'll need to monitor her closely. It was a serious crisis, but she is strong," said the doctor, offering a glimpse of hope. Emily finally left the hospital, still weak, but with a timid smile on her face. John was by her side, helping her walk to the car. The journey home was smooth, and Sarah felt a sense of relief seeing Emily out of the hospital, although she knew recovery would be slow. Back at home, John and Sarah prepared a comfortable space for Emily to rest. John devoted himself completely to caring for his daughter, preparing her meals, helping her with medications, and spending hours by her side, talking. Each day, Emily seemed more receptive to John's presence, opening up a bit more. While Emily rested on the couch, John sat beside her, holding her hand. "Emily, I know things have been tough, and I know there's still a lot we need to sort out. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. Always." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and gratitude. "I know, Dad. I'm starting to see that." Emily's words filled John's heart with hope. They continued talking, sharing stories and moments they had never had the chance to experience together. John talked about his life in New York, his achievements and regrets, while Emily spoke about her school experiences and her hopes for the future. Sarah watched from a distance, seeing the two together, and felt a wave of emotion. For the first time in many years, she felt as if they were a family again. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed the bond forming between John and Emily. Despite all the challenges, Sarah knew they were on the right path. The journey of reconciliation and healing was just beginning, and each step, no matter how slow, was progress. That night, as John and Emily talked in the living room, Sarah joined them. She sat next to Emily, wrapping an arm around her daughter and holding John's hand. Together, they formed a circle of love and support, promising to face the future united. The reunion had not been easy, and many challenges still lay ahead. But with slow steps and in their own time, they were beginning to rebuild their lives together. The faith and love that sustained Sarah were now beginning to envelop John and Emily, creating new hope for the future. Sarah smiled, feeling at peace at last. Life was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, she could see a bright future ahead. With John by her side and Emily in her heart, she knew they could overcome any obstacle. If you enjoyed this moving story of redemption, love, and overcoming, don't forget to like, comment, and share with your friends and family. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories.